How do you show up for someone you've hurt deeply, especially during a season that's supposed to be filled with joy and togetherness? Today on Hope and Healing Chats, we're diving into part two of our special series on navigating the holidays after intimate betrayal. I'm your host, Manifa Ellis Addy, and today we're welcoming back Dr. Janie Lacy, an expert on love addiction. We'll be discussing the unique challenges both love addicts and intimate betrayers face during the holidays and find ways to navigate this season. But first, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Welcome back, Dr. Janie Lacy.
So glad to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. So let's dig right into it because you're an expert. I mean, you're a CSAT, so I know you know both sides, but your bread and butter is dealing with female love addicts. And for me, it's more dealing with male sex addicts. So I wanted to bring you on to have this discussion because every holidays, I usually do something talking about how to get through the holidays, but from the male's perspective. And I was like, oh, I've never dug into the other side. So I'm curious, what are the differences and similarities? For instance, with male sex addicts or betrayers, they tend to be not really knowing how to move, so they'll be very avoidant in their behavior, and they might leave everything onto their partner to take care of the holidays and do everything while they kind of crouch back and let it go. And I'm wondering, especially when we talk about like male and female traditional roles, lots of times it is on the female partner, like taking betrayal out of the mix, just traditionally. So I'm curious how that shows up for love addicts. If they're the ones that did the betraying, are they still stepping into those traditional roles, or do they do the same thing and maybe fall back a little bit more? Or is it more of an anxious thing?
Well, the good old therapy answer is it depends. However, having just finished my Women Redeem 12-week virtual program, we're actually having this conversation, right? So what we'll see, especially around the holidays for my female love addicts in particular, is abandonment wounds coming up specifically around the holidays. And the reason why I think abandonment comes up around the holidays specifically for love addicts, because as you mentioned, it's different for looking at those that would identify as a sex addict, is that love addiction can often be like romanticized. When you think about the vision of the holidays and what it should look like, right? Those perfect Instagram worthy moments, like love addicts just love that stuff, right? They love the fake stuff. They want to be able to be Instagram worthy, taking those pictures in front of the Christmas tree or whatever it may be. But I think the other part of it with love addicts in particular, when we're thinking about them romanticizing the holidays, for example, is that the validation of being chosen, right? So if you're going home for the holidays, perhaps like some of my love addicts that have gotten engaged, they want to be introduced to the family. They literally create a fantasy in their mind of what that looks like. And when that doesn't happen, it's devastating, right? So, and then I think about other things that we were conversating about for my love addicts in particular, is family gatherings can be triggering in general. I think people with trauma, it can be triggering in general. Going home for the holiday means facing family members. Like, for example, are you still with so-and-so, right? Or when are you going to get married? You guys been dating for 8 years. Like, when are you going to get married? So I'll hear that oftentimes. And then for a love addict who's already, most of the time, right? Because I know some of my love addicts don't like, this doesn't apply to me. But when they're anxiously attached, they're desperate for that commitment. And there's a term, and as I get ready to say it, cuffing season, right? Yeah. So this is called cuffing season for a reason, because there's this desperate attempt that they just want to be committed. And then the external pressures amplifies it. Instagram, the holidays, or even, I don't know about you, like if you're scrolling through YouTube, it's the holiday season where you're seeing all the Ring commercials.
Yeah, or the bill on the car, naturally.
Yeah, exactly. So it just amplifies this already, and these pressures, these external pressures, and then it creates the internal panic in all seriousness. But for the love addict, a typical love addict, and I know everyone is nuanced that may be listening to this, is the relationship status is the obsession, right? So I have clients who spiral during the holidays because they're not sure if they're invited to their partner's family events. They're organizing what gift to buy because there's usually a measure of what the relationship wants to be because they want to be able to talk to their friends. It's validation, right? So I think everything becomes a test of love, especially for the holidays. But then what we'll also see, I know there's a controversy around this word in some of our CSAT circles, but I would say there's a heightened codependency that also comes out with my love addicts. They go into overdrive, trying to create that perfect, especially Thanksgiving coming up, that perfect Thanksgiving spread that they want their partner to experience. especially
Mm,
if they're bringing them home for the holidays. They're baking, planning, gift giving to the excess because they also love bomb, right? When we think about love
yeah.
addicts, they love bomb also. But if there's something that has happened that disrupted them, or even if they were the betraying partner, there's a desperate need to kind of get things back in place for that picture perfect setting is what I see in particular for my love addicts. But I think while we're on this topic, it's probably also important to say, right, the holiday breakup. I know this is maybe another interview, but the holiday breakup here, right? Many of the
Mm,
relationships end around the holidays, and we know that. Love addicts, they live in constant fear of this. So they become hyper vigilant. They're reading into every text, every mood shift, every canceled plan. So all of that stuff kind of comes up. And that's why I started by saying abandonment is key
yeah.
when it comes to my love addicts.
Which is so interesting because on the sex addict side, it's more avoidant. Like, I'm going to stay away. I don't know how to operate in this. Even if we go to the family function, maybe they're, acting super friendly, over connection with everyone, but not actually dealing with the issues that, their partner's dealing with trauma or anything like that. It's all avoidant. Or having the big gift, which you mentioned, the picture perfect gift, but it comes out differently. Like it's a picture perfect gift, but
Yeah,
to avoid, not necessarily to connect.
I see that a
Yeah.
little bit differently.
Yeah.
So if we can riff a little bit about it. So with the sex addicts, what I see around the holidays, I also see, and maybe you'll agree with that, I'm just going at it at a different
Mm-hmm.
angle, is that the holidays is a perfect storm of stress, opportunity, and justification. And the reason why I
Mm-hmm.
say that is that the financial pressure of a typical sex addict, and sometimes we also are assigning a gender to that.
Yeah.
But we look at the family obligations, potentially the travel stress that's involved. It forces interactions with difficult relationships, and that's where you're talking about with that avoidant. Where for the
Yes.
sex addict, all of that stress triggers the addictive cycle. So they're
Yeah.
looking for an escape, a release, and a way to numb out. So the increased, and I say the increased opportunities actually happen, at least for the sex
Oh,
addicts. I've worked
absolutely.
with the holiday parties, the work events with alcohol, they're traveling for business or for family, and it all creates opportunities for affairs or sexually acting out. And I think I've as I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about this January with all of this coming out after the holidays. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, that's actually, yeah, that's absolutely it. Because that's the fuel that leads to the avoidance and wanting to step away because now the pressure is on. Like, am I going to do this right? Am I going to buy the right gift? Maybe I'll buy the huge gift thing they've been asking for a decade. Now's the year that I'm going to buy it, which usually doesn't go over too well. I don't recommend that. But it's, yeah, the pressure is on. So then the stress comes on. And then now it's avoidant because now I need to step away and take care of myself. So now the pressure is so heightened that they, acting out is possible. Or I guess you say the brick is laid out for a possible acting out, which actually just leads to the next thing, support, right? So if you're a sex addict or a love addict, like how do you get through this season? With sex addicts, I'm always saying, make sure you have that support. You plan it before we get to the holidays because when you get to the holidays, some groups aren't meeting. Maybe the person that you were calling for accountability, they're not available. They're doing their own thing. Like, what are the things that you can do ahead of time and having your own personal plan for when trying just to get ahead of it as much as possible.
Yeah, so before we kind of go right to the solutions, I think it's important to kind of set it up a little bit, and you kind of opened it up with that when we kind of do the compare and contrast when we look at a sex addict versus a love addict. As you're talking about it with the avoidant of a sex addict, a lot of times I will see, and you can tell me your experience is more internally focused. For my love addicts, it is externally focused. So what they need would be different, right? So with my love addicts, they become completely consumed with their partners, their feelings, their behavior. Are they available? Their anxiety is about the other person.
Mm,
Where typically the sex addict,
yeah.
their behavior is to regulate their own emotions.
Yeah.
So while the love addict is focused on them, they're also focused on themselves. But
Yeah.
they have more self-medicating behaviors, where the love addict is a lot of the anxiety that's coming up. So there's visibility versus secrecy is basically
Yeah.
what that
Mm-hmm.
is, and that matters when it comes to accountability, because a love addiction is going to be often visible to and exhausting to those around them, right? So many of especially just coming out of the Women Redeemed group, it's fresh. So a lot of times they don't want to talk so much to their friends because they feel like they exhaust their friends. I'm always talking about it. And then they're like, oh, okay, well, why don't you leave him already? Right. Which we also know is not the healthy type of friends, which is why I'm setting it up. So the love addict, they're constantly seeking the reassurance. Am I doing the right thing? And they're constantly talking about their relationship and analyzing every detail. So the people that are around them, they do get exhausted. So with that being said, which leads me into your exact question, which is why I had to set that up before I say this, because when I tell my love addicts, I always have to back it up anyway, is support has to have high accountability. And high accountability also means the right accountability, because those friends that get exhausted when you're talking about their relationship and you're constantly seeking reassurance, they get you isolated because you see their reactions. You see that they're like, oh, we're talking about him again. You're still with him. When are you going to leave him? That is not support. I want to make that clear, because if that is their normal support system, and those are their, ride or die girlfriends, for example, and that's who you're used to talking to things about, like, this is not going to be the support for this season.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why we have to distinguish it. So then I'm a big believer, and if you don't have healthy people who can just be supportive of you, and they're not going to get exhausted because they would want you to do the same thing for them, then that's where you do go to support groups. That is where you do find a set of people who are working on the very, very thing that you are working on. Now would be the time to do that, right? Or even probably maybe 2 months ago should have been the time to do that. But getting a support system, and if you can't get a support system, then obviously we're a therapist. So big component of therapy and having the therapist kind of help you construct a plan to be able to get through the holidays. But I believe you cannot get through the holidays in a way that is healthy when you can look back and not regret it by not having a support system.
Yes. And because the holidays are rough. Take all the stuff off the table. The holidays are rough, period. And then you throw this on top of it, it just intensifies everything. And you touched on something earlier that I wanted to circle back on. We were talking about expectations. For those that are, even are in a coupleship and trying to make this work, how would you talk about managing expectations? Because then on the sex addict side, we're like, do those check-ins, talk with each other, like how do you see these holidays going, and allow it just to be kind of open for anything. How would that look on the love addict side, especially when they have such an intensity around expectations? Basically,
for my love addict, there's a couple of things that I think, it can be the widespread. First thing is you have to learn how to self-soothe. So like when we start our Women Redeem, every session we do a grounding exercise. Every time we get ready, we do a grounding exercise. And we do that on purpose so that we're also modeling for them what self-soothing looks like, how to breathe, how to check your environment, how to make sure your feet are literally on the ground, which can help regulate those emotions without the external validation. But if someone's not practicing those things, they're not going to, and people say, well, I tried to breathe my way through my trigger. That's too late.
That was your first time doing it. Right. Doing this. Yeah.
Exactly. So it has to be, we have to practice, right? So I have to learn to run 12 miles 12.6 miles, I should say, before I run the half a marathon, right? I can't just go to the half a marathon and I'm going to sprint and think, well, I know I'm in good shape. I should be able to run. No, I had to be practicing 3 to 6 months ahead of time. So when the day comes, because the day was going to come, that I'm able to self-soothe, I'm able to be ready to run the race. So the trigger will come, but that's why the practicing of the breathing, the grounding, and I recommend a Tapping Solutions app. That's a resource for your listeners. Tapping Solutions app, they can literally mirror, what's happening in the video real time. So there's YouTube, there's tools that can help. So that's one practical thing I should suggest that everyone, I think we all need that anyway, to learn how to ground, self-soothe. And if we're making that a practice, then when we get triggered or we get highly stressed, we're already doing it. And then the second thing I would suggest, in particular for my love addicts, is working on a secure attachment and developing a sense of themselves outside of the relationship. And they can do that from a practical standpoint of journaling affirmations and then saying it to themselves in the mirror, literally, like starting to speak over their life. I teach my son, who is an 8th grader, and now he does it without me asking. And I've been doing this for 6 years. So ever since he's been in elementary school. It's so perfect. I am brave and I am smart and I am strong, right? Yeah. I'm brave and every single day. So now he speaks it over himself. So he's not looking for me to be able to say, oh, son, You're brave. You got this. That's a bonus. That's an extra. He can speak it over himself. Again, this is more of a long-term strategy because to move from anxious to secure, you have to be able to get it within yourself and not externally. And then the third thing I would suggest, especially around the holidays, is setting boundaries and learning to tolerate the anxiety of uncertainty, which I know people that have anxiety, as soon as I said that, the anxiety's coming up. Right? But literally, right? Because that's what we're calling, we're increasing the window of tolerance when we can just, I'm feeling anxious. What do I need right now? You know what? I'm going to sit in this. It's uncomfortable. I'm going to sit in here for a little bit. And when it gets too uncomfortable, then I'm going to get up and I'm going to move. And then if moving is not going to, I still feel highly activated, it's not coming down, then I'm going to call a friend. Right. So I'm literally just giving you a little example of that's what it looks like to sit with your anxiety and be able to tolerate it and then start doing your self-soothing tools. And then we know that you can't go into the holidays unless your trauma work has been addressed, the root of your abandonment issues. I mean, so I can give you all the box breathing and all these other things, but when someone's doing their work, their trauma work, especially, they're able to be conscious, they're able to speak what's happening. They're able to not go home for Thanksgiving and pass the peace to Uncle Bob, who molested them when they were a child. And just because Big Mama wants them to come home for Thanksgiving, they're no longer going to shut it down. They're going to have the boundaries and say, Mama, I love you so much. And every year I truly enjoy going to Thanksgiving, but this year I'm not going to go. Especially if Big Mama, I'm just calling her Big Mama, if she's in denial, you don't have to say, well, Uncle Pete, you know, or molested me, a little girl, and you guys all know it in your suit. No, because you're going to blow up the family. You have to know that she does not have the capacity to know my truth, but I know my truth. And my truth is I'm not going to go home and sit next to and pass the peas to Uncle Pete when every time I see him, my body literally shuts down. I go in self-protection mode and I'm just waiting to the clock to tick until I can leave my Big Mama's house and go home. So boundaries is part of trauma work, because then if you do your trauma work, then you know that you have a right to protect yourself and not go home for the holidays. So what that also means is that I have to have alternative plans. That's going to be more honoring of myself, because during the holidays, and you were saying this or going down that path, right? We have to create realistic expectations. And many people show up for the family holiday, or let's say they'll pretend when they know that they're the sex addict and the love addict, that there's betrayal trauma that they're dealing with. But yep, we're going to smile for the kids. And then something gets triggered. And the next thing you know, that was your picture, the fantasy. And you now were the Grinch that stole Christmas from your kids, because your kids are seeing what's happening and you couldn't contain the trigger because you thought you can stuff it down. And now you're blowing up and you're telling him how much you hate him because he slept with your best friend Tammy in front of the kids. Yeah. And I'm saying this on purpose because these variations of these stories have happened during the holidays, because people were not doing the trauma work. They were not having these types of conversations. They didn't work on their secure attachment, and they didn't learn to self-soothe. So I think that's going to be important, and having a healthy support system beyond the romantic partner, because love addicts, in the midst of their love addiction, they isolate family and friends. They stop doing the things that are important to them. I'm talking about a typical love addict. I know someone's listening and be like, oh, that's not me. A typical love addict is they isolate, and then they're only laser focused on their partner and what's going on with him or her.
A lot of that, right, for the sex addict is the same, right? Because you have to do the trauma work, the grounding, practicing all these things ahead of time, not just in the moment when it actually happens. Because you're right, everyone comes back and they're like, it didn't work. And it's like, but how long have you been practicing this thing? Like, I haven't. I tried it that time when it started. It's not going to last. But what I found interesting is when the last part what you just said, where they have to find a source of support outside of their partner because that's what they lean into. Or if like on the sex addicts, we kind of lean into the partner because they've been finding coping and everything else outside of them. So it kind of flips in a way where we're like, lean in. Don't look to your outside stuff to... that's where the problem is the outside. So we want you to go in. Whereas with the love addict, you're like, lean out because you look at them for your full source of support.
Yes. And that's why I teach my love addicts when they start really getting into their work, is to know when they're seeking reassurance, right? Because this way they can pause before they're asking for it, because that's that anxious attachment. And the neediness that sometimes can be described as their partner. So they have to know, okay, what am I seeking reassurance? And why am I seeking reassurance? But when they do the mindfulness work, when they're doing the self-soothing work, when they're doing all the things before they need it, then they're able to answer that question. Then they're able to say, I'm seeking reassurance from my anxious place versus I'm seeking reassurance from my healing place, right? So that's going to be important. And then another thing that I also recommend, and this can be in general, this doesn't necessarily have to be around the holidays, but I think it applies to the holidays, is make a list of the things that you enjoy independently, especially for my love addicts, right? Because most of the stuff, because of anxiety, they're always thinking about doing things with the other person, and when the other person's not around, it's almost like, and again, I'm just making a blanket statement, it's almost like they're waiting. They're just waiting for the sex addict, or they're waiting for the qualifier, or the person who has all their attention to come back around, versus you can do things independently. When they're not available, learn to be in your own skin and do things. And action builds confidence, right? So in order to get confidence that you can do things independently, you got to go do them. Have dinner, go to the movies, take a walk in the park, do something, create novelty, because when people create novelty experiences, they do it independently, they're more likely to do it more, and they don't have to just wait for their partner. And I think that's going to be key. And I suggest, so if you want to give your listeners a practical thing, just do one thing a week.
Yeah.
Just for you independently, outside of your routine. If it could just be one thing, it could be on your way from work, just stopping and maybe, well, I'm in Florida, so maybe this sounds a little crazy, but getting some ice cream here in November. It's still warmer now, right? Where you normally wouldn't go, get out of your car and just get some ice cream and sit on the bench by yourself.
Yeah.
So it could be baby steps.
And adding on to that, because you mentioned something about like, you don't have to go to Big Mama's house if you don't feel like it. And I feel lots of times with sex addicts, because that pressure is on, maybe what the trauma was at their mom's house or whatever the case may be. I always say to everyone, don't be afraid to create new traditions. You can do whatever you want. There's no way that the holidays have to be led. You want to take a trip all by your lonesome and go somewhere, by all means do that. Like communicate and create new things that, are just something for you. It doesn't have to be something to please family members.
And that's where they can journal their feelings instead of, taking time to journal their feelings, instead of feeling like they have to do something, especially for my love addicts externally. Or in this case, we recommend, and there's a great app. If you haven't tried it yet, I know everyone's about the AI, but I'm like, this is a great time to use some AI resources. Yeah. Is the Untold Journal app. It's not my app, and I'm not getting any money for it, but I know it helps because you get some interaction. So they can journal their feelings, or especially if there's some type of breakup or they're going through a detox during the holidays, instead of immediately texting their partner or calling their partner, they can go on the journal app and they can talk to it, they can journal, and then the AI, they can choose to have the AI bot, or they can call her Susie to respond to her.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think it's a great app. And I think some of these tools can be a complement to people making it through the holidays, especially with loneliness, or if they're going through withdrawal or they're going through a breakup during this time.
I love that idea. I had never heard, there's so many out there, but I have not heard of that one. And speaking of tools, you just talked about wrapping up the Women Redeemed group. Are you having another one cycle through the holidays, or what does it look like? I know that's
so it'll be in January. In January will be our next cohort of women. So, but our current cohort, we will be getting together over the holidays. We do a ladies' night out, right? Because part of, and again, I always have to kind of say this, typical love addicts, not all love addicts. Some love addicts say, I know how to get along with women friends. It's talking about, traditional just women love addicts, is that we do a women's get together so that they can also learn how to interact and have healthy relationships with other women, because love addicts usually get isolated. And then other women, if they're with, if it's a typical love addict, sex addict relationship, other women become a threat, especially if they become hyper focused and their spouse has engaged in some type of betrayal trauma. When a woman comes, a love addict sees that woman even before he does, Yeah. So a lot of times, that we see that with our love addicts is they say, I don't get along with other women. I don't have a lot of women friends. They have one or two. So we're teaching them that women are safe. It's just been our experiences of women that have been made safe. Women have been, because the hypervigilance and anxieties, you detect the threat even before he knows. Like, he could be sitting in the restaurant and he's looking at you, and you see the attractive waitress coming to your table, and she's taking a deep breath because she's noticed the attractive waitress even before he did. Right? That does a number on your nervous system, and then it creates a messaging that other women are a threat detection. So we like to get the women together, not only as they built the bond for 12 weeks, but to kind of also set it up where they can also have accountability way beyond our 12-week program.
That's beautiful. I mean, we've
Mm-hmm.
talked about this. This is a tangent, so I'm not going to stay there too long. But just like how,
Mm-hmm.
as little girls, how we're set up to kind of pit against each other. There's always the evil stepmother. There's always the beautiful sister, and the other ones are they like the ugly stepsisters, or whatever. There's always this thing where women are getting put against each other for Prince Charming.
Yes.
That,
Yes.
but there's never Prince Charming taking any responsibility for anything.
Yes. Yes. 100%.
So we're kind of wired at a young age to not trust each other, unfortunately.
And it makes me very sad, but that's still an existence. Even more so, I'm jumping on your tangent bandwagon. But with social media, right? With the slew of messaging towards especially our young women, because it's so fresh in my mind. So I was just talking about Gen Z coming back from DC, is the messaging for young women with having to be bigger, better, have the better purse, and and you haven't even turned 19 yet. So it's
Yeah.
almost like setting you up for competitiveness and setting you up for independence versus collaboration and community. We're still seeing so much of that: higher depression, higher anxiety, higher dysfunctional, in our wheelhouse, toxic relationships with the Gen Zs, and it continues with that competitive spirit that you mentioned, that we just get set up from a very early age, or the mean girls, right? We get all these
Mm-hmm.
messaging versus we are so powerful together, collaborating, us together, having this conversation.
Yeah.
We're so much better when we collaborate with other women, because I believe, especially having gone through it myself, is that when you go through, especially for a divorce, the best community is to be around other women who can help you fill in the gap, that can help you. Well, I'll take your son during, I'll take him, and you go to, and then you switch off. With the community and collective of women, when there is some type of relationship trauma, is the village of raising the kids, which is why they say it takes a village.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the men are out hunting, the women are there cooking and cleaning,
Yeah.
and traditionally helping each other, right, is the point there. So I think the messaging, which is why we went on this tangent, is that support, especially for a love addict, is to be around other women who know what it's like to be so preoccupied and anxious about what is he doing, where is he at, is he acting out, or what is he gonna get me for the holidays? My fantasy is no longer over. I'm now in this anxious state that we're constantly fighting, and then to be able to have someone alongside of you that you can talk to as your support system, that understands that and won't judge that, and that's powerful.
Yeah. I think we'll leave it right there because I want that to sink in with everyone. Thank you again, Dr. Janie Lacy, for joining us today. And if you would like to know more about her and Women Redeemed, her info is in the description below. If you like our content, please like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. And as always, remember to embrace your healing journey. Every step forward brings a new hope for tomorrow. See you next time.